This is a very personal talk. I thought it was important in this conference to have, the views of people that are not, usually in these conferences, like me, for example, being a Native American from Mexico, from northern Mexico. My father is from central Mexico, is Nahuatl or Aztec, and I grew up in the city of Monterrey. I am also queer, and I immigrated to the United States 12 years ago. And I am antispeciesist too, working in the US. So thank you for this opportunity. And I just wanted to share with you because, it's wonderful that we hear people from all over the world, but this is also important for you concerning since people of color and people that we are colonized are the majority of people in the world. So if we wanted to really create change in the world, we need to start this dialogue and more depth and take it very seriously. So I just want to share with you quickly this quote by David Peña Guzman, who is in my team in Faunacción in Mexico. And this group, Faunacción, is an all-Mexican group that we've been working for 3 years in Mexico City, and is for Mexican people to empower Mexican leaders and activists, especially women of color there. And so this is a really good quote from an article that he wrote in Anti-Colonial Food Politics. And this article is coming soon. Is going to be published via the website of Faunalytics in the United States. So if you can check it out, this is a great article. And it's about one of our projects in Mexico, Faunacción too, El Molcajete. And so it called my attention here. Obviously we are not that the people of color is the vast majority. And also this second part, it says that, I'm gonna read it. This is what anti-colonial philosophers and activists such as Frantz Fanon want to remind us of that we will never succeed at separating the historical facts of colonialism from the effect it continues to have on the hearts and minds of post-colonial subjects. So it called my attention that we've been having a lot of conversations about this in the United States. I organize with also queer, QTPOC people, queer and trans people of color in Atlanta, and Atlanta is mainly an African-American town. So we share all these, effects and impacts of colonialism there. And so I just wanted to point it out that this effect of colonialism is still, being dealt and being felt by us. And so this is something to keep in our minds while we are thinking and moving forward with these conversations that we are having, and I'm hoping to keep having and invite other people to keep having these conversations and see how we're going to move forward with problems in these movements, such as the lack of diversity. If you look around, there are not too many people of color, and I myself been going to conferences in the United States for the past 10 years, and I don't find too many people of color, Mexicans or indigenous people like me, or black people. So I think that is something that we need to take very seriously, and we need to get an interest as animal rights activists if we wanted to be successful helping humans and non-human animals. And there is another quote here that I found interesting. This is from the 2013 article on the New York Times, and it says, talking about different Native American people, that while the original Americans did change their environment, new studies of ancient and present-day ecosystems have found that since European settlements, the vegetation of North America has undergone a radical and continuing transformation, unlike anything seen in thousands of years, even in some areas commonly thought as wilderness today. So it's also, interesting to point out that this transformation is still being felt by the environment, by the plants in this case, and by the people like you just saw in the quote by David. And there is one more quote here. This is a book. This is a coming-of-age story of a queer indigenous kid in Oklahoma. And when I came to the United States, I first lived in Oklahoma, and I wanted to understand more about Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is a state in the Midwest in the United States, and this is a state where a lot of tribes were marched from their original lands to that state and relocated. And so I wanted to know more and more before I went to Oklahoma, and I was reading this novel. And there is this auntie talking to this little kid, the Josh, that's his name, and he's asking about wolves, why there are no more wolves in Oklahoma. And she's telling him that there are no more actual wolves either, to my way of knowing, because when all the WPA, which is a US program in the 40s that they put to give jobs in the United States, was to put in big dams during the Depression. They drowned all of that wild country where wolves and cougars and even bears lived in. And that stuck on my head because I, when I went to Oklahoma the first time, I saw all these dams, and I saw how they break all these landscapes and all these natural areas for animals too. So this is just a program in the United States, but I know that there are many other programs that are still in place in the United States that are still impacting animals and people too, indigenous people. And so I just wanted to, share this with you. So because I know that these are difficult conversations and complicated conversations, but we always have to keep in mind these things that people of color in the world are still impacted by all this colonialism and the new project, colonialism and capitalism, and also the landscape and the animals. And now, I share a little bit about my bio here. And so I come from a very strong tradition of activism in social justice. My father was union organizing, a very, very prominent union organizing in the city of Monterrey, in northern Mexico. It's a city that is like 3 hours down Texas, Laredo, Texas, close to the Gulf of Mexico. And he was blacklisted for organizing, and he organized a very successful strike in Monterrey. And so I come from that background, and I came from this reality too in Mexico, from a very marginalized community in Monterrey, and it's really tough to be in these communities. It's really I think that this really mark you for a long time, and it's really hard to get out of these communities too. And so this is part of my background and who I am too. I discovered that I was very empathetic. I have empathetic feelings for animals when I was very young, because my mother always rescued dogs and cats, and even though she was not vegetarian, she was really worried about animals all the time, and I helped her out when I was a kid. I come from a family of 13 kids in a big family, and so I was the youngest of the family, and my father took the notion of having a business in the side for money, and he bought a pig, and that pig was, she was pregnant, and she gave birth to 12 pigs, and I was the one that had to take care of the pigs and give them food and water them and everything, and I became really close with these little pigs and with the mother, and I didn't know, they never told me that they're gonna sell the pigs, and so they grow, and all of a sudden they were sold, and I was very shocked when this happened, and I was in the house. I was still 5 years old, and these men came in a truck to load the pigs, and I didn't know. I was confused what was going on, where they're gonna be, and they told me, oh, they coming because we sold them and they're gonna be killed. And so I put up a big fight, and I remember that I run to the pen where the pigs were and closed the door. And so my father was very, very mad. And we had this like big fight. I threw them rocks, and it was like a big, big scene that the whole neighborhood thought that I was crazy. And they overpowered me because I was a very, very young kid. And, you know, they took the pigs, and I was like really crying and very sad. And then all the kids start to make stories about me because I cry for those pigs. So they were like saying, oh, you know, you are like a girl. And since then, there were start to be a lot of bullying. So I've been homeschooled before, and I learned to write and read and other things, do math and stuff since I was a younger, like 4 years old. So, you know, I went to the elementary school, and I told my mom I don't want to go to the school because, you know, there's a lot of kids that make fun of me, and, you know, they tell me that I'm gay, and because you know, I cried and all that, and I don't want to go to school anymore. So my mom says, fine, you can stay here with us. So I found a very safest place in the kitchen with my mom and all these women, and I stayed there until I was almost 11 years old. And my father was very mad because I was there in the kitchen all the time and because it's very hard work in the kitchen in these poor neighborhoods. Usually they had a different room where they cook, and they have like either a little stove with gas or sometimes like, you know, even wood to cook. So you have to get water from far away to cook. And so I was doing all these chores, but I was really happy to be with women, all the group of women, and you know, learning all these things and hearing all these stories and gossip. And yeah, I felt very comfortable with being all these females. And my father campaigned for me to be out of the kitchen then when I was like gonna be, you know, 12. And so I had to like get out of the kitchen, but I didn't thought too much about that until I was like, you know, writing a bit for this presentation. And it's funny how they, you know, like, because I was empathic and I was in solidarity with non-human animals, they thought that I was, you know, also, you know, a girl or all that. And so I, you know, I really like to be with women and hear the stories, and, you know, like also my sisters were in the kitchen. I have a lot of sisters, so they did a lot of you know, girly things, and I played with them and everything, and I felt really, really happy. But I was in the kitchen, nobody see me. But when I went away, you know, outside the kitchen, then I faced really, really like big threats, like sexual harassment, you know, rape, attempts of rape, and a lot of violence. So, you know, I was really scared. I didn't know what to do, and I know that I cannot come back because I'm becoming a man and a young man. So I had to, you know, perform to be a macho and heterosexual, and block also my empathy for animals. And since then, I started to block that and start to work on that. And I remember that, you know, in the school in Mexico, since you are like in an elementary school, in first grade, they talk about this guy. This is our first president in Mexico, and his name is Benito Juarez, as you see. And he's from an indigenous state in southern Mexico, Oaxaca. And he's an indigenous guy that performed really good to be a Mexican. So, you know, the school told us all these stories about him, and the goal, I think now, that thinking in retrospective, was to you know, like to be Mexican, and to you know, what is to be Mexican for, let's say, all the indigenous people in Mexico. So I got the message because I also, you know, have a lot of problems in the institutions, also with authority, because I was indigenous, and they really, you know, marked that. And I remember in elementary school being always put in the back of the line, or like in the last road. And like I remember trying to participate in the classes and ask questions, and I was never, you know, like they never said, oh yes, what do you want, like, you know, answer my questions. I was like invisible. So I got this idea that, you know, because I was indigenous, they didn't like me too much in the city of Monterrey. And it was better to perform. And so I started to get more and more interested in, to speak better Spanish and, being a Mexican, identify like that. I didn't ask questions about my background anymore to my family like I did before when I was a kid. And so this is all my decision of being safe and to do this performance of being heterosexual, very macho. And, I didn't then block my empathy towards animals. In Mexico, we have a lot of animals in the streets, pigs, dogs, cats, in these neighborhoods, in poor neighborhoods. And I saw this like abuse, but I didn't intervene. And so, I keep going like that all my youth until I was an adult doing that. So until I was like 27, I was working on, on human rights, and I'm very interested in organizing in communities, in poor communities, like my father and my mother in Mexico. And the Zapatista uprising happened in Mexico in January 1994. The Zapatistas are an autonomous indigenous group, and they are armed too, and so they did an uprising on January 1st, 1994, when NAFTA went into effect in America. And I was very moved by that, and then I started to question myself and what I have done all this year with my own identity as an indigenous. And I, wanted to go to help them. And so I was talking to people in Monterrey and what to do. And they say that the Zapatistas were calling people, the civil society, to go to help out in southern Mexico, in Chiapas. So I went there, and I participate in what they call the belt, the peace belt, and it was like basically we had to organize a human belt around the place where the Zapatistas were going to have the peace talk with the federal government of Mexico. And it was a huge undertaking, but I was very involved. So I stayed there, and the action, the belt went really good, and the Zapatistas have a peaceful talk with the government, and it was not all good, but yeah, I was very happy that I participated. And after this happened, I decided to stay there in Chiapas for a bit. And I got in touch with a human rights that was doing indigenous rights in San Cristobal de las Casas, and told them that I wanted to help. So I got trained with this organization, and they were going to the indigenous communities in the jungle, in the Lacandonas selva or jungle in Chiapas, to talk about indigenous rights with the people there. So I signed up for that too, and I was supposed to go to some communities, but we were told that there was a fire in those communities in the jungle that we could not go. So we wait for 2 days, and then they told us that we could go then to the communities and visit and try to be in solidarity. We were not going to do any talks, but just to comfort the people and be there. And I was very nervous. I didn't know what to expect, and so we got to one community that was not all destroyed, but we saw passing other communities that were like totally devastated by this fire. And so we went there, and people were like mainly just like, I guess they were very tired because they had to put the fire, women and children put the fire for 2 days. And so I got to talk to one family, and I asked them if they were okay and where they're gonna be, if their house was okay. So the lady, there were like 6 kids and a mother, and she told me that their house was being consumed by the fire. And I'm like, well, I'm very sorry, and I don't know where you're gonna go. She said, oh no, that's fine. We're gonna go to my mother's, to other village. We are okay. And I'm like, I'm trying to give some words of comfort. I didn't know what to say. And I say, I'm sorry that happened to you, and if we can help anything to rebuild. And she said, yeah, we are sorry, but actually I'm very happy because we put up the fire, and the fire didn't touch the area where some precious birds are in the jungle. And so that was something very shocking for me because I didn't know what to say. Like, I didn't thought about birds or animals. I was just focusing on trying to help them. And then she started to tell me stories about those birds, why those birds were so important for the family and for the community and for her. And that just blew me away. And just like the uprising of the Zapatistas start to like put me out of this performing and being comfortable, trying to be heterosexual, and Mexican. This also questioned my, all the empathy that I had blocked for animals all these years, and make me think a lot about animals for the first time after so many years. And so since then, I start to be more interested in finding out things about how can I help animals since that experience. So I thank to the people of Chiapas, to the Mayan people, for making me feel very uncomfortable and out of my comfort zone. And that's what I started to become interested in animal rights since then. And of course, since that is my background, being before I got interested in again on animal rights, or I identified as antispeciesist. I'm also interested in this tool, in the intersectionality as a tool to work and trying to get some good impact for humans and human animals too. And I understand that all these systems of oppression are interrelated, and they help each other, those systems of oppression, sexism, speciesism, racism. So I understand this, and I understand because I live some of those too. And so I've since then been very interested too in trying to work. I didn't know the word of intersectionality, but I know that they were interconnected or interrelated. So since then, when I found Fauna Acción and talked to the activists in Mexico, we said that we wanted to benefit, impact the humans and non-humans, and we wanted to use this as a tool in our group in Fauna Acción. And so this is a little bit of who I am, and it's kind of hard for me to share with you because I'm very tired and more emotional. But I think it's important. It's important that you hear people that come from a very different background, not just, I'm indigenous, but I'm also from a very poor neighborhood in Mexico, and this is very different. So I think that it's important that you hear that. And so 13 years ago, I immigrated to the United States, went to Oklahoma, and I was already interested in animals and helping groups in Mexico. But mainly they were doing animal welfare, rescue of dogs and cats, etc. And so I try to help them whatever I can when I go back to Mexico. But I always trying to do more there in Mexico. And I talked to some people in my city of Monterrey and told them that it should be good idea if we're trying to consider to have a conference and talk about animals and talk about animal rights too. And that was very new for them, but they were interested too. So we start to talk about that. And finally, in the summer of 2006, we put a conference on animal rights in my city of Monterrey in the summer, and it went really well. I think more than 150 people came to the city of Monterrey from all over Mexico, and they have really, really good discussions. People do a lot of network, and I was really happy that it was touched the issue of animal rights then in that conference. So since then, I've been in the United States and trying to help more and more the movement in Mexico, and I became more involved, trying to understand and be connected also in the United States with the people that organize for animal rights, and went to some conferences in Washington, D.C., or the animal rights conferences, or Los Angeles. And I don't gonna share with you the good things that I learned in all these years. There have been a lot of good things, but there have been also a lot of challenges. I didn't speak English when I came to the United States. I went to the United States to work as a Spanish teacher, and I just learned English by speaking to my students. So obviously the language was a very big challenge to overcome in the United States, but I also saw that there was a lot of tokenization of people of color in the movement, and people call me in Oklahoma to do some actions with them, and they want me to just to be present and to, for example, sometimes they say, we're gonna go to do. They were doing like a circus protest, and they say you can talk to the Latino people. I'm like, oh great, yeah, I can talk to them, and they give me a speech to like talk to them, and I thought that the speech was not very good, and that they were not going to be like very into that message. And I say, oh, I wanted to like do some changes of these. They're like, oh no, it's fine, like that. Just say it in Spanish. That's all we want. And so I saw this kind of, I had this kind of experiences, more than one time in the movement in the United States. And also, I was very isolated. I didn't speak English. I was in Midwest, in Oklahoma, and it's very conservative state. It's very white too. The part that I was is very white. I guess that in Eastern Oklahoma, there are a lot of indigenous people, and I could go and have a break from that kind of environment because there is a lot of indigenous people that does ceremonies and cultural things, and I start to get in touch with them. So that was really, really good. And so this is a list of things that I put here for you to consider when you maybe are doing this dialogue with people of color and having conversations with them to like take this in consideration. And it's very self-explanatory too. And I have to say that, yeah, there is a lot of racism in the United States. And today I was in the talk of Lisa, and she said that we all are learning and we all have to be compassionate. And I think that we all can be reproducing racist attitudes, and we have to really be more, not very fragile about like being confronted or being called out about this, and really think that because my experience is that many people get very sensitive about these issues. And I have 5 minutes, and so anyways, this is the tour that I'm doing now. And if you have questions or friends, just come to me afterwards and we can talk about that. And so I just want to tell you quickly about Fauna Acción. We are a very young organization in Mexico City, 3 years old, and we are mainly concerned to empower Mexican activists, especially women of color, and do conferences. We have already 3 events, big events in Mexico that went really well, and also trainings and other things that we can bring tools that are useful for the activists in Mexico. And we have a project that we really like, and I show you the quote at the beginning. It's called El Molcajete, and that what we're trying to do is to start conversations about food. And also we are very interested in reclaiming the indigenous diet in Mexico. I think that we don't talk too much about veganism. We talk about our foods, Mexican food, and I think that in that part of the country, the diet has been historically plant-based of the indigenous people, and the industries, and also in the United States, the Tex-Mex, and have been really successful in rebranding and having a different outlook of the Mexican diet, and people think that some food that is not Mexican food is Mexican food, but we are rescuing some old recipes, and we basically go to wherever people invite us and cook with them, talk about food. We have a little pop-up library, and we share materials with people too there. And if people want to talk about certain subject, it doesn't have to be veganism, other subjects, health, or sustainability, environment, etc. So we can talk and we can tailor some talk for them. So this is a very important project that we are very proud of in Fundación. And you can learn more about on our webpage. So it's www.fundacion.org. So at the end of this presentation, I have 4 amazing leaders. And the first person that is here is working with Fundación. And in Mexico, there is a big problem, like I guess, in many countries, of violence against, and it's very dangerous for activists. And her name is Jessica Gonzalez, so you can write down her name. She's very active in Mexico, and she's now very interested in talking to women, and is going to do all-female leaders gathering in southern Mexico, and they're going to talk about the issue of safety for women, because a lot of animal rights activists, females, have been harassed, and 2 have been killed in the past years. And so this is a very important issue for them. And yeah, I will recommend to you to look her up and support her as much as you can. And so this is another great activist from Mexico City. Her name is Paola Poli Sotomayor, and she's very interesting. She does a lot of different things. She does food activism, she does lgbtq, and there's a lot of social media. You can find videos about her in YouTube and all over, like in Facebook. I don't use that too much, but she's great activist to follow and to support. And she's now, sad to say, she's been harassed by some corporations in Mexico because she had a campaign against exotic animals. So she's been getting messages, threatening messages, and she has to go underground too. So yeah, she's a really good activist, and we worked together in a forum the past month. She worked with Fundación and did a training, and it was great event. So then there is Paola Ibarra, and she's from Mexico City, and she has done all these things with groups like Anonymous for the Voiceless and the Save Movement, and I see there is some people here from those groups. And now she's interested in having a micro sanctuary, and also is starting to have a partnership with her. She's in southern Mexico now, so she's another great activist to support in Mexico. I mean, there are just 4 here. I don't have time to share so many activists, but they are some that I really like their work, and they're really powerful and passionate and very smart, great Mexican woman. And then there is Fabiola Martinez, and I'm very happy because she works now for the Veg Fund, because many Mexican activists, obviously like the whole movement is comprised of more women, and they don't get paid, or they always have to put from their pockets to do their activism. So it's great that she's doing that. And she's also support a small sanctuary in Monterrey, my hometown. So she's another person that you can follow, get in touch, and support too. Thank you for watching. I have a question for you. Do you think that it's important to have more diverse voices in this movement, yes or no? And people of color in this movement, yes or no? And give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe to this channel. Thank you.